Resilience helps you stay in the flow when the waters get rough. If you're not resilient, you just drown. Just because you don't want to be like your parent doesn't mean you're not. I'm okay letting them be right or win because I'm not in that place anymore where I need to prove myself. Belonging and inclusion is making people feel seen and heard. Let's find out which one is most important and what you could use some help with.
Leaders ready to level up? Angie Lyon went from poverty and trauma to a leadership titan, transforming teams and lives. From the operating room to the Leader U podcast, she's cracking the code on emotional intelligence, resilience, and real deal leadership. Get raw, no BS strategies to crush self-doubt, rally your team, and dominate in chaos. This is the playbook, guys, today. The playbook for leading with purpose. Angie, thanks for being on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for that amazing introduction. I feel a little intimidated now.
You're recognized as the woman of influence in entrepreneurship. What does this award mean to you, kind of like as a woman personally? And what do you look at? Because you're in the leadership space as far as empowering women.
So I suppose it's really an indicator of that I'm making an impact. And that's really aligned with my values. And I really believe my purpose is creating ripples of impact. I'm really working in this phase of my life towards being more internally validating myself rather than seeking that external validation. So while it's acknowledging it and it helps me to know that I'm on course. It's not, the external awards aren't what I'm looking for in this phase of my life. Hasn't always been the case.
Mm-hmm.
Earlier in life, I was hustling for my worth and just struggling to survive like everyone else. But I really don't feel like I'm in a space where I need to prove myself anymore. Now I'm more focused on improving myself and listening to my higher self and my soul and living in that space. So while I appreciate the award, it doesn't change that I know, I have a knowing that I'm in the right space, but it does acknowledge that people are noticing. And that kind of gives me a signpost that, hey, you are on the right path. And I really feel aligned when stuff like that shows up, but I'm not needing it. If that makes sense.
I like what you said about aligning with your higher self, because I think and higher self can be a lot of different things. It doesn't have to be spiritual per se. It's just like that best version of who you are. What does that look like, for you? Because you said the improving, like the inside work that you're doing. What, like specifically, what do you mean by that? Did you have to get over external aspects of being a woman leader?
Man, I've had to get over so many things.
Oh, we all have, yeah.
And I'm still climbing out of some holes. So, right? Like even when you think you've gotten over something, it doesn't mean that a big wave won't wash over you when you get triggered from something else. And then you're like, shoot, I guess I have more healing in that area that I wasn't aware of. And so, yeah, I've had to get over a lot of hurdles of self-limiting beliefs, self-sabotage, and also blaming other people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like literally that was probably my biggest go-to early on in life was victimhood. Because I was a victim, I didn't know how to get out of victimhood.
I want to hit, when we look at your journey from the operating room as a certified surgical technologist to a leadership development expert. And to me, that's kind of fascinating. And I know you're writing a new book and that's coming out, and we'll talk about that. But how have high stakes healthcare environments influenced your approach to leadership? Because I think as leaders, especially like the tech leaders we have on our episode, we don't understand that environment and what that looks like. So let's start with team dynamics and the high stake healthcare. Can you kind of explain that environment?
Yeah, well, let's start with why I went there in the first place. So I've always wanted to help people. That's just always been part of my mission. And I know that I'm a wounded healer, which is basically what someone who's endured deep trauma or emotional pain and adversity in their life, and their own healing journey becomes a healing journey for other people. So I know that. And the term was popularized by Carl Jung, but really, I know that I have a strong empathy, resilience, and commitment to growth. So at first, at the time when I started working in the operating room, by that time, I was late in the game. I already had 2 kids. This was 2003 when I started working in the operating room. So I wasn't a young kid when I started. I was already a mom. But I was really surprised and also disappointed when I started to work in the operating room because I naively thought that I'd be working with professionals that were both professional in their craft, but also in their behaviors. And so, boy, was I wrong. The operating room is kind of like the Vegas of the hospital. What happens in the OR stays in the OR. And patients are asleep. So different behaviors show up in the operating room than any other place in healthcare, as you could imagine, right? And so what I learned over time was I was always fascinated with the human body and how it worked and helping fix people's problems. But as I watched people, I really started noticing how people were unaware of their people skills and their human skills and their emotions, and including myself. But I had a high I think I've always been very curious about watching people and people watching and learning and noticing, wow, does that person just know what they said just diminished their whole team? Or now,
Right.
like, I would people watch, kinda like I was in the zoo. Like, I would just watch the show and see what was happening and start to notice who was really good as an orchestrator, like, who could lead a team and could make people bend over backwards for them and ultimately give their patients really good patient care, and who would use power over to fear monger and to make people afraid of them, to not which would actually ultimately make people make more mistakes. They wouldn't have the psychological safety, they wouldn't speak up, and they would actually be more passive aggressive in their way, which ultimately impacts the patient as well. Not that anybody wants to, everybody wants to put the patient first,
Right.
but the behaviors of the leaders in the room impact the ability for people to do that. If I'm in fear or fight or flight working with somebody, my performance is not as good as it is if I feel like I'm able to speak up with a surgeon and say, I think you just contaminated your glove. Could you change your glove?
Yeah, and that's interesting because I know you often speak about transitional intelligence, TQ, and alongside like emotional intelligence. Some people may not have heard of TQ. Can you explain what that is and how it differs from EQ?
Yeah. And so recently I heard of TQ and I became certified in transitional intelligence. And I was very intrigued by the term. But you're right. Most people have heard of emotional intelligence or EQ, which stands for emotional quotient. It's all about understanding your emotions and the emotions of others and using that awareness to navigate your relationships, your decisions, and your communications more effectively. But TQ or transitional intelligence is like EQ's cousin. It's
Mm.
your ability to move through change with intention. And so it helps you stay grounded when life throws you curveballs or those big waves. And then you adapt when things don't go as planned. Because if you've been on the planet long enough, you start to realize life doesn't really go as planned.
Right.
And so then you start to realign with your purpose, even in the messy middle of the transition. So, like, while EQ helps you feel your way through the moment, TQ helps you move through the moment, especially when you're standing in the space of liminality between what was and what's to be or what's coming next. So it's kind of becoming uncomfortable with uncertainty and not knowing, which is not normal for most people to not want to have all the answers or know the outcomes.
Yeah, I think this is something that's being missed, and I think this is really important. I kind of want to stay on this just for a few minutes as TQ because what we have going on right now is tons of transition.
Right?
I mean, I don't care who you are, whether, like you said, a hospital, or you're a health insurance company, or you're an local auto dealership. It does not matter. You're going to have the disruption that's happening right now on all different types of fronts from technology. And Gary Vaynerchuk said a really cool thing that he said technology is undefeated. We can go through history and we can see technological points. They've always, they always win. So what's happening now with AI and all these things that are going on, we're going to have mass amounts of disruption. And you don't have to get into AI or the technical aspects of any of that. But as far as TQ goes, how do you handle like rapid change? What does that look like as a leader?
Yeah, it's not a skill that many people are good at. And so, like anything, it is a skill. You don't become a good surfer if you don't get out on the surfboard. You don't become good at pickleball if you don't spend time on the court. But these leadership skills can be taught, they can be learned. And this is where we want to fill the gap and help people become better and more resilient and more open and shift their mindset to being able to handle uncertainty and also adapt and be more flexible and adaptable in these ever-changing times, because the more rigid we become, the worse we suffer.
Do you feel like when it comes to, I mean, I know your organization, and we'll have that in the show notes, the links to your organization, but do you feel like when you're talking with leaders or coaching leaders or having workshops that there's a disconnect with this? Like, are they not seeing the importance of it?
I don't even think, well, where I live and in a lot of spaces that they're so in the weeds that
Mhm.
they don't even have time to stop and reflect on these things.
So it's
So
reactive instead of proactive.
it's all reactive. It's react to stimulus. And so this is why the work that we do is so important, because it is taking time and creating space for people to stop, reflect, reevaluate, notice what are the threats that they're facing and what are those fears, and really diving into what's real and what's imagined. But our brain's hardwired to do that just so that we stay alive. But most people don't know that and don't get the pause. And this is why it's so important for organizations to take the time to pause and help people navigate, because when they are just in fight or flight, or they're just swimming and swimming, they're wearing themselves out, they're burning out, they're not showing up, they're not engaged because they don't have tools to be successful in these kinds of times.
Do you feel like, I mean, like you're saying they're in the weeds, reactive. Is it because like emotional intelligence, this plays a role in it? Or, like, I mean, one of our podcasts is self-aware leader, so
Mhm.
it's like you said, taking the time. What I have gotten to be is like, why am I perceiving this to be a threat? Why am I, why do I have the emotion of fear right now?
Mhm.
It's like asking those questions, those self-aware questions to get to the root of it. Cause it'd be like, this person triggers me, she reminds me of my mother,
Mhm.
And so and you would be, that sounds silly, but you would be shocked at, and I know you know this, but you would be shocked at how it could not even be related to the problem. It
Yeah.
could be something, some trauma or drama that you experienced, as a 9-year-old. And I've talked to a lot of leaders that way, where they were like, I talked to one leader and he's like, my mom would always shame me when I ate food. And I was really, I mean, he looks great now. He's like 53 and in shape, but he's like, I have this thing around, if a woman gives me criticism, it destroys me.
Mhm.
And so, because my mom would always give me criticism as far as, and then she would make me walk from the mailbox back and forth to try to lose weight because I was chubby as a kid, but I was always drawn towards food. So what he would do is, when a woman would critique him, he would just run to food. That would be his. And so trying to figure all that out, that had nothing to do with his problem. I mean, that had everything to do with his relationship problems personally. And then also why he had a pretty much all male dominated alpha shark type. He had 200 something employees and they were all mostly male, so besides the back offices and stuff. So once we addressed that, it was pretty easy. Have you seen things like that with leaders?
Yeah, I always think when I coach them, it's gonna I used to think that it was going to be really work related, all of this coaching. But the more I work with people, I realize it really does come back to their childhood or their baggage. We all have emotional baggage and we have to face it at some point. It shows up with us. And it could be baggage from parents, it could be from previous relationships, it could be from experiences with other bad bosses.
Mm.
I can't tell you how many organizations I work with that are really doing the work with their people, and they've come from other environments and they just can't even believe this new environment that they're in, that they're focused on learning and development, and they get to learn about themselves and they get to learn about their bosses and their communication styles and what they like and what drives them, and talking about emotional intelligence and setting them up for success. They just feel so valued, and it's transformative to
Mhm.
people to be able to work in a space like that, and it's life changing. And I mean, people are crying in these workshops like, I can't tell you how much different it is to be in this space than the old space that I used to work in. And every executive that I've worked with, some of this stuff, they all have this. And you think that people that are high executives or surgeons, or they get to this place that, they've got it all figured out, or they must be doing something right. Well, they're good at I'll give them that.
Yes.
They're really good at their craft. And where they may struggle is looking at themselves in the mirror and finding out what their triggers are, what the issues are holding them back, healing those triggers, figuring out what the root cause is. And I would say that the root cause of even that example you gave of the person you talked to with their mom, I see that most of the root cause of all the problems come from somebody feeling like they're not enough
Mm,
or they're not
yes.
safe. or they're not safe.
So to alchemize that, because this is really interesting, because that was the thing that I had to come up with. I don't know if you ever heard of Gay Hendricks. He wrote ULPs, like upper limit problems.
Uh-uh.
It's really interesting. So it's basically like we have a thermostat in our life. I don't want to go into this too heavy, but it's basically a thermostat in our life. And when we hit upper limits, like not the lower limits when they're down, but when we get too high of a wave, we don't know, we can't handle that much love, abundance, and success. So we self-sabotage ourselves and bring us down into that comfortable range, that thermostat. And so people, it's like, oh, I slept with my secretary. Boom, I'm back down again. My company was doing well. I embezzled some money. Boom, I'm back down again. So it's really interesting to see, these characteristics and people acting out these things. What are you seeing? Because I know you host the Leader You podcast,
Mhm.
and it's about empowering humans, flourishing and working life. So pause this, guys, and go subscribe to Leader You podcast. I mean, I know you started the podcast, but are you noticing the same pattern being run? Whether you interview people or whether you're, teaching on that, is this what people are wanting?
Yeah, I think they really wanna be understood and heard and acknowledged, and also they really do want to get over, and they wanna get over those traumas that are holding them back and their self-sabotage. They just don't know how, and they aren't often given an opportunity or even know that it's a possibility because they don't know many people that have done it, or they haven't opened up and been vulnerable enough to share that, "You have that struggle? Yeah, welcome to being human." Like, we all have that struggle. It's just not everybody's willing to talk about it. They look confident. Their social media looks great. So we're seeing a version of people, the perfect version. And that's why I think more vulnerability and more difficult conversations and deeper soul conversations, like going into the vault, not talking about just sports and the weather and what color you're going to paint your kitchen. That stuff is so surface that you're not going to connect on those types of levels. And so I think people are craving deeper connection more than they ever have because social media and just phones and technology in general, while they're great tools, they're not tools for connection. They're tools for communication, but it's still not the same as being face to face with somebody. Or imagine yourself, I just thinking about this. We had a dinner with friends the other night, birthday dinner that we were invited to, and two of our friends' birthday were 6 of us as a couple. And I can't tell you how good I felt that night after just laughing, belly laughing. I mean, we were riffing off of each other, and there is nothing like that collective effervescence where you're all experiencing something together and you're feeling each other's energy and you're laughing. And we can do it a little bit virtual, some virtual intimacy, but it's still not the same as when we're in the same place and we're just being our authentic selves. Like you're in flow and there's nothing else actually going on around you. I felt bad for people that were sitting next to us because I know they were like, "I wanna be at that table." They look like they're having an amazing time.
That's so cool. Why do you think C-suite or teams cannot have that same dynamic and flow?
Ego is one of the big challenges. Being afraid to admit that you don't know everything or that you're not good at this or the other thing. So I think ego is probably one of the biggest obstacles. So ourselves, that's what I learned when I work with people. Oftentimes you think it's external barriers, but really when you start to dive into it, we have our own internal barriers and blind spots that we actually can't see if somebody else isn't willing to help us out. It's just like if you were doing a golf swing or trying to pick up surfing. I don't know the techniques that I'm not good at unless I have somebody observing me and saying, try this next time, don't do that. Or what do you think about this? How does this feel? Try this on. It's the same thing in executives, like coaching is they need to know, hey, that conversation didn't go as well as you had hoped. What do you hope to accomplish next time? What could you do better? How would you show up as your best self versus your habits that you've created? Because we all have habits that we go to when we're uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's so interesting because you mentioned, and I think it's cheap, like the cheapest energy drink you can buy, maybe the illegal ones that are in, Mexico or something like that. I saw in Russia they put tobacco in it, they put nicotine into energy drinks. I think that I'm not good enough is that cheap fuel that gets a lot of entrepreneurs to be successful. But once you're successful or whatever, that gets to, once you step into that leadership role, it shows itself out in these habits, like you were saying.
Mhm.
I want to get into that with authenticity Because we always talk about like, let's cultivate authenticity, let's be authentic. What does authentic look like for you, And I think a lot of times we don't know how to do it, and then it comes off real cringy, or, it's like, well, or like leaders will be, I'm trying to be authentic. And then they're just opening up themselves in a weird way to, employees. What does that look like to you as leaders, bringing out that, perfect atmosphere, which would be everybody sitting around the table having an amazing time?
Yeah. Well, it's a lot of unlearning.
So everybody needs to get together and unlearn.
Unlearn.
Yeah, yeah.
The more I learn, the more I know I need to unlearn. And what I mean by unlearning is kind of chipping away the things that you used to do that got you where you are, but aren't going to be helpful now.
Mhm.
So, authenticity in leadership to me is like knowing the source of your river. And this is my metaphor in the book. I view life as a river, us as rivers, the journey of life as a river. And so that's the metaphor I'm using. That's knowing your values, it's knowing your story, even the cringy parts. Cringy Angie like has some really cringy parts that I'm not very proud about, but still part of my story. It's knowing your why. And when your leaders get clear and have clarity around that, they can lead from a place that's grounded and not performative.
Mm.
And resilience, it plays a role in that too, because it helps you stay in the flow when the waters get rough. If you're not resilient, you just drown. But the more you are resilient, it helps you stay in flow. And then it also keeps you from abandoning your authenticity just, when the tide shift or when the pressure rises, right? So it's like how a river would carve through a rock
Mhm.
over time.
Mhm.
Resilient leaders stay true to their path and they adapt to the landscape, but they know how to flow and not force. And that's where their true power lies. It really comes to unlearning things that, like most of us get our leadership skills and attributes from things we've observed. And let's be
Yes,
honest,
yes, exactly.
many of it is not that great. Much of it's not that great. And we can learn as much from our anti-heroes or our
Yes.
sucky bosses as we
Mhm.
can from the good ones.
Mhm.
So, what we know is over time we gain experiences, we start to recognize patterns, and we start to decide, well, I don't want to be like that. Well, just because you don't want to be like your parent doesn't mean you're not. You have to
Yes.
actually start to build some new skills. And you
Right.
probably are like your parent, and that's why they trigger you.
That's so true. Do you feel like this is so good because you just said something like super wise. I want people to understand this. Your leadership is just you observing things and figuring patterns. And evolutionary psychology talks about this. It's just and then you get a reward mechanism.
Mhm.
And I really noticed this with myself and my leadership a long time ago when I was on a trip to Thailand. And whether we can talk about the ethical implications of this or whatever, but there was these little monkeys that they were training. There was a person and it had this little monkey, and then the monkey would do a trick, and then that person would give them, and then you could put money down, for the monkey or for the person or whatever. It was like one of these little sideshows as you're walking around.
Yeah.
But the monkey was doing it solely based off of getting that piece of fruit. That
Extra
that
extrinsic rewards.
and I sat there and all of a sudden I was like, "Oh, pardon my French." I was like, "Oh, fuck. I'm that monkey."
Yeah.
Like all of my leadership is like, "Oh, I earned this amount of dollars for doing this. So whether this is right or wrong, that's what I'm doing."
Mhm.
And I taught my sales department, okay, this is the best ROI. So this is how we're going to do it. Maybe it's in a gray area, but we like to flow in the gray areas, that type of thing. And it was like, oh, I trained my organization just to be monkeys and get
Yeah.
fruit. And that's what you're saying about authenticity, as a leader. We always hear this, understand your why. Like for you, like personally, how did you get to the point? How'd you get down the river far enough to where you're like, this is what I want to do. This is why I want to help leaders. And specific, like in the very, very beginning, you had a specific like mantra of who you are and what you're wanting to do with leaders. How did you get to that point?
Well, first of all, I didn't think I ever would. I didn't know that the journey would take me here. Honestly, I had less ambition I wanted to do things. I wanted to work in the operating room. I never knew I would get to this point. But I think it's the continual learning and growing that have helped me evolve and emerge into and keep transforming over time. I don't even know what I'm capable of, but I know that if I keep doing the work and keep showing up, and I mean the internal work, that I don't care so much about validation from other people, but I'm doing stuff that it feels like it fuels my purpose. It fuels what I want to be as a human. It fuels how I want to show up. And trust me, I get it wrong a lot. I mean, I have adult kids, so they are really good at letting me know when I fuck up.
Hmm. Yes, yeah,
It's
exactly. Yeah, they're the best little.
While they're my biggest loves, they're also my biggest teachers. I mean, they
Mhm.
have taught me what joy and what pain really is. And so learning from them what I can learn to do better, they've been some of my greatest teachers because they've taught me how to apologize. They've taught me how to put my ego aside because I really want the relationship. I know that my need to be right that is in me that I could cut them down. I could basically cut anybody down in a conversation because of the way that I was raised. I have the ability to cut somebody down with my tongue in about 2 seconds. Like, I could really ruin somebody, and that's not something I'm proud of. And so it's something that I have had to work on and learn to sit with it and also recognize and ask myself, do I want to be right or do I want this relationship? What is most important to me? And that has transferred me into leadership too, where I want to listen to help people be heard and I want to apologize if I've come off in a way that I didn't mean to come off. Even if my intentions were different, that doesn't mean that's how they perceived it.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
I have to recognize everybody perceives the world through their own matrix or their own lenses, but a lot of lenses, based on your background, your behaviors, your emotions, your backstory, your intelligence. We are deep people, right? We have a lot of layers. And so knowing that people have these different perspectives allows me to zoom out and go, what they're telling me is giving me a window into what their needs are and what their fundamental why we're having this conflict. And so, I mean, it's just giving me perspective and
Mhm.
being able to lower the ego to allow them to be right, even when they're not. I'm okay letting them be right or win because I'm not in that place anymore where I need to prove myself or I need to win the conversation. I don't want to lay at bed at night, thinking about the things I said to
Yeah,
somebody.
so I this was so funny because right when you said that, I thought of, like, World War II, those flamethrower guys
Yeah.
that are just shooting out, like, mass amounts of flames. Don't you feel, though, that it's a superpower too? Because I think our shadow, the shadow work that we do, because this is something I had to learn, is it's not bad. Like, there's good things to you, like, you can see truth where others can't.
Mhm.
And that's that. It's just the way you message it out, you know? It's not the
Mhm.
honey, you know what I mean? You're not putting out honey to somebody. But that's a superpower because a lot of people can go through life and not see truth, or they won't look at this situation and be like, and I know you guys have had this at your work where it's like, I don't think we should hire this person. And then, whether it's Rob, your husband, which I interviewed, I encourage you guys to listen to that, or whoever, maybe they're like, why? Like, and then you have like this sixth sense where you can kind of peer through. That all comes from that cutting in 2 seconds,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
It does. The longer we're around, the more we have intuition, and we also have tools, scientific tools that actually help make better hires that kind of help us get out of our biases, right? Because let's face it, we like to hire people like ourselves.
Mhm, mhm.
And we oftentimes the job doesn't call for another mini me. It actually calls for somebody with completely different skills than me.
Yes, exactly, 100%. And I think now, even nowadays with technology, we can hire people from all over the world. And that's what we have with the global aspect of things. And I had a question on that I wanted to ask you. As someone who works with organizations on culture enhancement, and I don't want to use the word inclusion anymore because that's become so political on the left and the right. Both of them have like meanings to that. I like the word belonging better, like a culture of belonging.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that leaders can do to foster that, especially when you may have somebody that comes from a different ethical background, somebody that comes from a different country, and
Yeah.
has all different. How do you look at culture enhancement?
What I really think it comes down to is situational and individual leadership and improving our human skills, our TQ and our EQ skills. It's listening deeply and often. And as leaders, we need to listen twice as much as we speak, which is hard for extroverts. So it's a change. I'm an extrovert, so I'm not as good innately at listening as I am at speaking and not shutting up. So I've had to learn to have two ears and one mouth for a reason. And so listening more deeply and often, belonging and inclusion is making people feel seen and heard, not just in meetings, but in how decisions are made too. Um, when we can allow people to be part of the decision-making process or how they think it could work, they start to have buy-in. And
Mhm.
it's that listening deeply and often. I would also say 3 real key takeaways is probably that, and then modeling vulnerability, which is not what we were taught or modeled. And so vulnerability, when leaders share their own vulnerability and what they're learning, it signals that everybody is safe to show up fully and not perfectly. And I think people want to feel safe. Like I said, it goes back to that root cause of not feeling like they're enough or not feeling safe. Most people have these constraints. They come to work not
Mm.
feeling enough and not feeling like they're safe. So we want to make them feel like they belong and like they're safe and they are enough just as they are. We can work on skills, but you as a human being are just enough and you're safe in this space. Of course, you needing to work on skills is not a bad thing. So it's that creating a culture where it's like, yeah, you're not going to be good at all 20 things on your job description. Probably good at 5 of them. So let's not worry about those. You're nailing them. And these other ones, let's find out which one is most important and what you could use some help with. And let's not have an ego that you don't need to learn anything. We want to be part of a learning and developing culture. The other one is co-creating the environment or the current, right? So invite people to help shape the culture. People are the culture.
Mhm.
Culture doesn't even exist without the people. So co-create a culture and have them be a part of by including and belonging. And also, so you're including them and then you're involving them in the process. This is one of our models that we have. It's actually building community engagement, and it can work with businesses, with entrepreneurs. It can work with political movements. It can work with a women's group or a men's group. We want to bring people psychologically in to the place where all of a sudden they are included and they're involved, and then they start to create. Then they start to take initiative and they roll up their sleeves and they're like, this is something I want to be involved in. Now I got buy-in. I'm ready to do work and I'm ready to take a bullet for this person. I'm willing to do extra work. The surgeons that I really could get behind, I knew that I would go bend over backwards, go above and beyond for them. And even though oftentimes the hospital culture might suck, one leader could create a culture in that room for a full day that I could thrive in. And then there was some that could create a culture of chaos and just ew, like just ew, right?
Mhm.
Like you just don't want to be there. It shit always rolls downhill. If the surgeon's bad to the nurse is bad to the CST, like it's just shit
Right.
rolls downhill. And so what I learned is one really good leader can make a culture, even in a micro, you have micro cultures, just room 12, that operating room, what it's
Yeah.
going to be like is going to be different than room 2.
Mhm.
Even though there's 32 operating rooms going on right now, then that has its own culture. And then emergency department has its own culture and admitting has its own culture. So there's micro cultures and you get to be a part of shaping your team culture. Even if the hospital is a shit show and they won't bring in anybody and they got it figured out, which we know they don't, most of them,
Mhm.
that leader can impact their team. They can bring in somebody, they can start to create a culture in just their little microculture where people can thrive and people flourish. And we see this all the time. Even if we work in higher ed or if we work in hospitals, oftentimes the whole organization is just too big of a ship and they don't want to commit to this kind of learning and development. And so they're like, no, we can't do this or whatever. But you will get one department that'll say, "We wanna do this. We have our own budget and we wanna do this." And you go in and you work with them, and all of a sudden, that group starts to outperform, and they start to have less turnover, and they have more engagement, and they have people, willing to do the work because they're invested in, they feel involved, they feel included, they have psychological safety. All of a sudden, they're in an environment where it's like, "Wow, I've been looking for this all my life."
Mhm. Yeah, I love that, and one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is this younger generation, because I love millennials and, Gen Z and all of those. Most of them don't have never had a real relationship because 'cause they're so on their phones, their parents are busy working, teachers are disconnected. Like, if you look at every adult figure that's in their life, it's really easy. You can kinda be, like, halfway good at relationships and establish a relationship with a young person really if they see authenticity, they're all in. Like, and if you're looking them in the eye and they're not looking you in the eye because 'cause they're kinda awkward, but they're craving that,
They are.
and so it people are like, "I can't work with." Well, there's a secret power to that. So we're on the hour. So, Angie, this was amazing. I want to ask you one last question before we go. For our listeners who are aspiring leaders, we have a lot of young leaders, or they're looking to enhance their leadership skills. We'll get into the stuff that you're doing, but do you have something aside from, your website and the things that you guys have? Because we'll talk about that here in a second. What are the top books, resources, or practices you recommend for a young leader?
Yeah. So I would really start to work on the human skills, communication and emotional intelligence skills. Those skills are going to take you the furthest. The more we get into technology and the more AI is coming around, the more you can improve those skills, the better you're going to be positioned to have a better life in general. So it's going to benefit you. And you're more likely to get promoted. You're more likely to make more money. You're more likely to be more successful. And even if you're an entrepreneur, those are the skills that are actually going to help you catapult you. And we know this from the research. So I would start to read books on communication. I would reach out to us for a communication tool. We have a lot of tools, and I would be willing to even, maybe even give a free one to somebody that reaches out through email and says, I heard about this. Like, I want to help people be better communicators. So as far as people that I followed and have been mentors, I would start to follow those people on social media. So Brene Brown, for example, I would follow her. I would follow anybody in the emotional intelligence space, Daniel Goleman, Travis Bradberry, Mark Brackett, Susan David, Dacher Keltner. I would really start Arthur Brooks, social sciences, start to learn more about those. What actually does bring happiness? How do you calm your nervous system? What are some of the tactics? I mean, how do you start to cultivate peace, inner peace in the storm? Working through finding that peace, defining success, what that looks like to you, getting help, getting a coach, somebody that's going to guide you and mentor you and call you out on your BS and not let you have justifications and excuses and be like, yeah, I've heard that one before. Or are you really, are you ready to face that now? Are you ready to do something different? We know we've heard this story, this song and dance enough. Are you sick of your own BS yet?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I love that. I want people to look at your website, your social medias, and all that. So, how can people better if they want to follow you or they want to know more about what's going on? I know you've got a book coming out. In a few. Is it a few months? Is it?
Yeah, it's coming out in September. It's called Emerge: Charting Waters to Discover Your Best Self, and I'm really excited. I've never written a book before. I don't know how to promote it. I'm not even. It's an FFT, first effing time, to do any of this stuff. So our website is Black River PM, as in performance management. My husband and I own the company. We also recently just started a business and launched it last week, but it's more for families and friends and retreats in Island Park, Idaho, which is right near Yellowstone. So it's more for personal relationships and communication and emotions and all of that. That's called theydo.net. And so we can give you the links in the bio and everything, but you can connect with us. LinkedIn is the best place to connect with us personally and with our business. We do have social media for the Leader You podcast. So you could follow that on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, but we don't have personal Facebooks. We really don't like social media in general. It's just, we know we need to have some of it, but LinkedIn is the best way to find us professionally. And then our websites would be the best way to keep in touch, or subscribe to our newsletter so that you kind of know what's going on, what we're doing, what we're promoting, what kind of retreats we have, whether they're executives or they're families or it's a couples retreat or whatever it is in this personal and professional development space.
I love it, and thank you for being so open today and giving so much wisdom out there. I know there's going to be a lot of leaders that are going to really respond to this, so I encourage all the leaders, go to your website, go to LinkedIn, and make sure you look at, and we'll have all those links on the bottom. Thank you, Angie. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you to the listeners for just putting this time in to upskill your leadership skills. Like I said, it's literally skill building. Every single thing can be learned, even if you're not good at difficult conversations or you're not very flexible or appreciating others. Those are skills that you can learn. Peopling or saying, I'm not good with people, that's an excuse. You can be good with people if you want, even if you're an introvert. You might not want to be around them all the time, but there are skills that can help you be good with people and help you in all of your relationships, both personally and professionally. So don't tell yourself that lie anymore.